So, I don't wish to be the bearer of bad news, but today is November the 11th, 2022 at the time of making this video, and I'm afraid to tell you that Apple have broken their promise to you. And you're probably wondering what I mean by that. Well, Apple promised us 2 years ago that they would complete their Apple Silicon journey in all of their Macs. Now, to most of us, we think this is complete, but actually it isn't complete, and I want to tell you why it isn't complete today. So let's explore the reasons why. So rewind the clocks back 2 years ago to November 10th, 2020. In fact, I'm going to rewind the clocks back even further than that. Let's rewind the clocks back to WWDC 2020. So this was June 2020 time, and at this event we saw right at the end Tim Cook talking about a transition of the Macs moving from Intel chipsets to their own Apple Silicon chipsets. These were basically very similar chipsets that are the same ones that we find inside the iPads and the iPhones, so the A series, except for it would have a brand new name that was later revealed in around about November time, and that was called the M series. But at WWDC, Tim Cook said this.
We expect to ship our first Mac with Apple Silicon by the end of this year, and we expect the transition to take about 2 years.
So as you can see there and hear there, Tim Cook said the transition to move over to Apple Silicon would take 2 years. And here we are, November the 11th, 2022, 2 years later after the Mac event that we saw in 2020. Don't get me wrong, we have seen lots of Macs being transitioned over, but there's one remaining what I want to talk about. But first of all, the Macs that have been transitioned over were back in 2020, and we got 3 products back then. We actually got the MacBook Air, and it was the first MacBook Air to be completely fanless with an M1 chipset inside it. We also got the Mac Mini, same design, but it had an M1 chip, and also the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch model with also the touch bar, also retained an M1 chipset inside it, and this was really exciting. Moving over though into 2021, into springtime, we got 2 more devices that got an M1 chipset inside them. One of them was the iPad Pro, but yet again, this isn't actually a Mac officially, so I'm not actually going to count that. But one of the other devices that got an M1 chipset inside it was the brand new 24-inch iMac, and they still sell this today, Apple do, and they haven't actually updated it as of yet. But moving forwards into the year, when we got to the fall of 2021, we got some brand new chipsets. We got the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, and this was put inside the 14 and the 16-inch MacBook Pro with a brand new design. And then skip ahead over into 2022, when we got to springtime again, we got another Mac again, what did get a brand new chipset inside it, and this was the Mac Studio. Technically, the Mac Studio replaces the 27-inch sort of Mac out there, the iMac, and or it could be regarded as its own separate device. Some people think there's going to be another sort of iMac Pro coming out in the future, but that's a story for another day. The point is, the M1 Ultra came out, and we got a brand new Mac with that chipset inside it. But what was most important at this event, Apple declared that basically their main M chipset journey was complete, except for there was one Mac missing from their lineup, and that Mac is the Mac Pro. The Mac Pro is the only device that Apple still sells right now what does not have an Apple Silicon chipset inside it, even though we are 2 years now into the transition, and Tim Cook promised us that all the Macs would be having kind of an M chips inside it, or an Apple Silicon chipset inside it. And here we are, we don't have it. In the summer of 2022, we got the M2 chipset introduced to us, and that got put inside the MacBook Pro 13-inch, no updates on the design, and also with the MacBook Air, which has a brand new design. And then further on, just only a few months ago, or even about a month ago at the time of making this video, the iPad Pro also got the M2 chipset inside it, yet there is nothing to do with the Mac Pro. So the big question is then, why has Apple broken their promise, and when will we actually see a Mac Pro with an M2 chipset or M3 chipset inside it, and what will it be called? Well, the main reason why I think that possibly that Apple didn't actually transition the actual Mac Pro into a transition of a sort of Apple Silicon inside it is mainly because of probably the Mac Studio. The Mac Studio is a super powerful device, and it only came out less than a year ago at the time of making this video. Remember, it came out in March 2022. If the Mac Pro got introduced right now, it would take a lot of sort of the light away from the Mac Studio, and Apple want to keep on pushing this. This is also a main reason why I don't think Apple have also updated the Mac Mini with an M2 chipset or an M2 Pro chipset inside it, because they know that the Mac Studio sales would come down slowly because people would be more likely to buy that instead, the Mac Mini. So I think there was some understanding of why that happened. Also, as well, as a lot of you guys have probably realized, lead times in getting your sort of Apple devices out there right now have been the longest they have ever been over the last 2 years. Whether this is to do with basically COVID-19 or a recession coming into play or a demand for more electrical equipment being created, we're not actually 100% sure. And there's lots of different theories why the reason is it behind this. And I'm not going to go into the full length details of why it is. It's just happening. And I believe that because of this, Apple have delayed out the Mac Pro for this. So the big question is, when will the Mac Pro actually be coming? Well, the Mac Pro, I believe, will be coming next year, and most likely, I think it might be announced at either the spring event, what normally happens around March sort of time, or it might get pushed out to WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference. And that kind of makes sense because the Mac Pro is a developer's machine, and it would make sense for that to be announced at that event right then, and also come out maybe a few weeks later on, or maybe a few months later on. One of the big questions though, what has been asked about the Mac Pro is, will it be able to be expanded? Will we be able to stick our own graphics cards in it? And how will it be built? Well, personally, I think what it'll probably be having two M2 Ultra chipsets inside it, what will be called the M2 Extreme, and a lot of other bloggers and YouTubers agree with this too. But we haven't actually seen the M2 Ultra, what actually essentially is two M2 Maxes, and again, we haven't seen the M2 Max or the M2 Pro. But I believe that this is coming out next year in springtime, especially that we didn't see the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros getting an M2 Max and an M2 Pro at the end of 2022, because Apple very recently announced that they had set all their products up for the end of the year into the holiday season, so there's nothing new until 2023. But something else that's along with that, one of the manufacturers, the main manufacturer of chipsets for Apple, what is TSMC, they actually are also saying that they're making 3nm die chipsets. And basically the M3 chipset is probably going to have this, and possibly the M2 Pro and the M2 Max might also have this sort of die. And with this, it makes the actual chipsets even more faster and even more efficient. And Apple might be waiting for that to come along, and then after that, make their Mac Pro device with that kind of chipset sort of architecture behind it. Whether it's 4 M2 Maxes or 2 M2 Ultras, we're not sure, but we get the idea that that is what Apple are planning. But I think the main thing to take away from this is that sadly, Apple have broken their promise. They didn't actually manage to transition all their Macs over to Apple Silicon, but at the same time as well, I think we could possibly forgive them that obviously that there has been a lot of things up in the air that Apple couldn't predict, with the demand of sort of chipsets and also chips to be, there's a shortage of them, and also the main thing that more people are working from home ever since COVID, and basically from this, Apple didn't estimate that that was going to have an effect on their products going forwards. So with that, in my personal opinion, I think they can be forgiven, and I don't know about you, I'm really looking forward to seeing the Mac Pro. Not sure if I'm going to buy one, because I bet you it'll be super extensive, and to be honest, to me, having an M2 or an M1 Max at the moment inside my MacBook Pro is more than enough for me, and also in my Mac Studio having the M1 Max. Obviously, I'd love to have an M1 Ultra or an M2 Ultra or an M2 Extreme, whatever it's going to be, but it's going to be overkill for my needs. But it is going to be really cool to see, and I might possibly buy one in the future. But the main thing is that we're not going to see it probably until 2023. And on that happy or sad note, whatever way you want to look at it, it's time to wrap up this video. We are going to be probably seeing the Mac Pro in 2023, and I'd love to know your thoughts, if whether you're going to be looking into getting this device or you're going to be skipping over to it. And also, are you bothered that Apple didn't transition the Mac Pro within the 2-year time frame? Let me know in the comments below. So with that guys, if you do want to hear the latest Apple news, reviews and comparisons, please make sure you subscribe to this channel, and also at the same time as well, make sure that you also hit that notification button too. And with that guys, it's time to go. So I'll see you really soon. Bye bye.